Hello everyone, welcome to Ghana ICT Club Code with Kwaku. If you are new here, please consider subscribing to this channel. And if you've already subscribed, thanks for showing up. Okay, so today in Code with Kwaku, we are going to talk about CSS or Cascading Style Sheet. Alright, so after building your web page with HTML, you need a language that will help you to structure it or to style it, and CSS comes in handy to do that. So what is Cascading Style Sheet? CSS is a style language that defines layout of HTML documents in terms of color, font, margin, padding, height, etc. Then what is the syntax of CSS? CSS is written in this syntax. Very simple. So the syntax has a selector P followed by color or a property. Then you bring your colon, then followed by the value, and red is the value. So after you've provided the value, you terminate the code with semicolon. So selector can be a name of your tag or element, a class or an ID. Then property is what you want to style, whether you want to style the color, the text, etc. Then value is what you want the color of the text to be. So in our case, we wanted the color to be red, so red becomes our value. Then semicolon is very important because that tells the browser that the first line of code is done. So you need to always bring your semicolon. Then make sure that your property and value goes inside a curly bracket. So basically this is the syntax of a CSS. Then there are three ways that you can implement CSS. We have the inline. Inline, this is written inside opening tag or elements. Example, P style equal to color red. So by this we've implemented an inline kind of CSS whereby the syntax is written inside our opening tag. Then we have the internal styling. With the internal styling, the CSS syntax is written inside a style element, and this style element goes inside the head element of our web page. So we have the head opening and head closing tag. So this is where your style element goes. Then you bring your selector, your property, and the value for the style. Very simple. Okay, let's talk about external CSS type. With the external CSS, you write all the CSS codes in another page. Then you link it to your web page. So by linking, you also link it inside the head opening and closing tag of your HTML page. And this is how an external CSS file is linked. So you quote your angle brackets, you write link, reference is equal to style sheet, then href, that's where you are linking your style from, or the file that you have your external CSS codes on. You bring it inside double quotes, and in our case the file is called style.css. So when you want to implement an external CSS style, you need to save the file with a CSS extension like so. So this link will pull all the CSS codes that you've written in the external CSS file to your web page so that it can be applied to your elements or classes. Very simple. And one importance of using external CSS is that, let's say you have about 5 HTML or 2 or more HTML pages, but you want to apply the same styling, like you want to give it a body color of ash, all the 5 pages, that's all the 5 pages, you want to have a body color, a similar body color, a similar H1 color, or any other element color, you want to have a similar value. You can just write all the codes in an external CSS and link it on, or link it to all your pages. So external CSS is very helpful when you are building, you have a lot of HTML pages that you want to style similarly. Okay, and these are some few notes. Inline styling takes precedence over both internal and external. So let's say in your internal or external page, you styled a p tag to be red in color, and you style the same p, you give the same p an inline styling of, let's say, black or blue. The blue color will take precedence over the internal and external style that you applied. Then internal styling also takes precedence over external styling. But then CSS provides a keyword that you can use to change this rule. So let's say, for instance, I have a p tag in an external CSS file, which provides a font size of 20 pixels. Then I also have an internal or inline style for the same p element with a font size of 50 pixels. Then I apply the keyword important to my external CSS file. In this case, the external CSS file will take precedence over both the internal and inline CSS. When we start to implement it practically, you understand, so don't worry. Well, then we have selectors. In CSS, you need selectors to style your elements or tags. So you can either call the element name or tag name directly. For instance, if I want to style a p tag, I can just call it directly and style. Or I can give this p tag a class name or an ID, and I call the class or ID to style. And the difference between class and ID is that with class, I can give multiple elements or tags on the same page a common class name. Let's say, for instance, I have H1, H2, and A3 on the same page. I can give H1 a class name of, let's say, heading 1. I can also give the A2 the same class name of heading 1. And when I apply styling to heading 1, it will affect both the H1 and H2 heading tags. And as I said, you get to understand when we get practical, so don't worry. Then you can also give a tag an ID, but here ID is unique. You can't give more than one element the same ID. So that's the difference. Classes, IDs are unique names that you can give to an element, and classes, you can give multiple elements the same classes. So basically that's the difference. Then we have pseudo classes. Forgot to bring the D. Pseudo classes are just used to define special state of an HTML element. For instance, if I have a link or a button that I want to style based on based on when I hover the mouse over it or visit the link or move away from the link, I can use pseudo classes to do that, and you get to know more when we start practicing. Then finally, let's talk about comments. Comments helps to leave notes in our codes, and it's not read by the browser. So in implemented comments, you just write the slash followed by star, then you write your comment inside it. So this is a comment. Very simple. So basically, this is an overview of what CSS is, and in our next lecture we are going to implement it practically. So see you in the next lecture. Okay, so in this episode of Code with Kwaku, we are going to implement CSS practically. In the first lecture, we talked about a general overview of CSS. And in this class, we are going to implement it practically. So this is a sample website that I built using HTML. So this is the foundation of the website. It's a simple profile website. That's what we are going to use for the styling. So first of all, we will talk about color. Yes, we will start our heading with a color. So from our HTML, this is the heading tag, or H1. This is where we can find our heading my profile. So we want to make this heading, let's say red, or we want to give it any color. And from our previous CSS class, we talked about inline, so we can just style it using inline CSS. Red. Then you just save it. So once I refresh the browser, you see that the profile, my profile has changed to red color. So this is how we implement inline styling. Or we can decide to use, let me refresh it again. Okay, so you see that it has reverted to black color. Now let's implement, okay, I forgot to bring the head. Alright, so this should go inside the head. Okay, so let's implement an internal CSS. So you just write your style opening and closing tag, then you style it. So now we will call the tag name, which is our selector. So H1, we are styling H1, so you just call H1, you bring your curly brackets, you give it a property and a value, let's say blue. Alright, so when I save and refresh the page, you see that our profile page will change to, you see that my profile text will change to blue color. But for this training purpose, we are not going to implement inline or internal. We are going to implement an external style sheet method. So let me delete this, save once again, refresh the page. So I've created a separate page called style.css. So this is where we are going to write our codes, our CSS codes. So before we do that, let me link our external CSS file to to our HTML page. So to do that, you just write the link, then you bring the name of your external page. So in our case, it's style.css. Style.css. Okay, so to create this style.css file, all that you need to do is, if you are using Visual Studio Code, you come to where your folder is, then you press on this new file, then you just type style.css. When you are done, you just press enter. It will create the CSS page for you, or the CSS file for you. So this is where all our codes will go. So first of all, we will talk about colors, or the color property. You type it as a comment. Okay, so color, first of all, we want to give the my profile text a color. Let's check. It was written in an H1 tag. So all that we need to do is to call the H1 tag. So H1 followed by your curly brackets, then you type color. Let's give it okay, red. Okay, let me give it this color. Then you terminate it with your semicolon. You save it. When you run your page, you see that the color has changed to blue violet. Very simple. So this is how we give a color to a profile. We are going to talk about text property. So apart from giving our font colors or our text colors, there are other properties that we can apply to them, and this is called, or this is grouped under text properties. So the first one that we will talk about is font family. So font family, no, let me call the H1 tag first. Okay, then I call the property font family. So there are different font families that you can choose, and VS Code will give you a list of some of them. So I'll choose the third one. Okay, let me choose this one. Save and refresh our page. And okay, so you see that our font has changed, or has picked this family type. So you see there are 4 different font families that are provided. So the browser would choose the first one. If it's not available, it moves to the second one, then the third one, and so on. So that is how we implement font family to our text. Then we can also give our text size, and we use the property font size. So let's give our font 40 pixel, a size of 40 pixel. Let me refresh. Okay, so this is how 40 pixel font will look like. Then we can also give it a font weight. Font weight basically refers to the weight of the font, and in our case, VS Code will provide a list which ranges from 100 to lighter. So it depends on what you want. You can choose any of them. Let me choose lighter and see its effect. Let me save, refresh the page. So you see that our text will be made lighter, but we don't want the lighter text, so let's keep it at 900. All right, 900 is cool. Okay, this is okay. Then we want to push the my profile text to the center. So what we can do is just type text align, then you choose center. We have center and justify left, right, but we want center, so just choose center. When you save and refresh, my profile will move to the center. So this is how we move text to the center. Then there is also another text property called text transform, and with this you can transform your text to either uppercase. Uppercase means make all text capital. This is how it will affect our text. Or you can choose lowercase or capital depending on what you want. Right. We also have this property font style. So with font style, you can choose whether you want your text to be italic. By default, it is normal. Italic will slant it a bit. Okay. But we want to keep it at normal, so we don't need this. Let me delete it and save. Okay. So basically, these are the common text properties that we can apply to our text. Let's move to the next property, which is background. And background can be applied to either text or the body of our page or any element on our page. So we can either apply color or even insert a background image on our page. So quickly, let's look at its effect. So background color, let's say we want a background color of gray, or let me use this hex code, FE. Hex codes, you can research on hex codes. You can either use the normal name of a text, the normal name of a color, or the hex code of it, and we need to wrap this background color code in our body element. So now what this code means is that we want to make the body of our page, or we want to give the body of our page this color. Let me refresh. FE, we are not seeing its effect because it's almost white. So let me use this E5. Okay, this also almost okay, so you see that the color has changed to light gray, or we could have simply typed the name. So you can either use the hex code or the name. So this is how we implement background color to our page. Let me maximize it. You see the background now is kind of gray. Okay, we can also insert an image into our page by just using the background image property. Then you call URL into brackets. Then you call the location of your image. In my case, I have an image called water splash in my HTML folder. So I'll just call that. And when I refresh, it will show at the background of my website. And you see the image is repeated. So there are other properties that you can use to control an image that you insert on your page. So we have the background repeat property. You can set it to either repeat or no repeat. No repeat means don't repeat the image. So by this, when I refresh the page, I only get one image. Okay, then the rest will be the color that I used. Let me get rid of the color. I don't want the color. I want it to be white. Okay, I'll just delete the property, refresh again. Okay, so now this is how it will look like. All right. Then there is also another property which is called background attachment. So background attachment refers to how you want your image to be fixed or to be attached in your background. It takes a value of fixed or scroll. So fixed means when I scroll, my background image should be fixed. We don't have content here, so okay, let me reduce this. All right, so when I scroll, we don't have any scroll bar. All right, no problem. Or I can give it a value of scroll. Scroll means when I scroll my page, the image should scroll along. But fixed means when I scroll my page, the image at the background should be at a fixed position and it shouldn't scroll along. Very simple. Then we have background position. So background position will also help you to fix the position of the image. So if I want the position of the image to be at the left hand side of my page, I can just use left as value, and by this the image will move to the left side of the screen. Okay, if I want the image to be moved to the right, I'll just change the value to right, and the image will move to the right side of our page. You can also use bottom or top, bottom right or top left. It depends on what you want. Bottom will move the image to the bottom. So when I refresh this page, the image will be moved to the bottom of our page. So I'll leave it at center. I want it to be at the center. Okay, so basically these are few properties that you can apply to a background image or to your background. Okay, let's talk about borders. Borders is simply adding lines around an image, a text, or what have you. And to do that is very simple. All that you need to do is you call the element or the tag that you want to implement borders around. So in our case, we want to implement borders around the second P or the second paragraph tag, which has a class name of P2. I hope we can remember class from our CSS overview. Class is just a name that you can give to an element and call it to style when you want to style that element. So to call a class name, all that you need to do is type a dot or a period and call the class name. So the class name for the second P is P2. Then you open, you type your curly brackets, you type your value and your property and give it a value. So we want a border around it, a border of say 2 pixels with a type of solid and a color of teal. Okay, so when I refresh, I'll get something like this. You see that borders have been drawn around the quote, and I want to, okay, yes, very simple. So this is how we draw borders around our elements or tags in a web page. And there are different types of borders. You can have groove or dotted. Okay, let me show you how a dotted border will look like. Okay, very simple. You see it looks like dots it will just draw dots around your text. Then we have dashed. Dashed will draw dashed lines around your text. Very simple. There are different types, you can read more about it, but let's leave it to solid. Okay, so solid means draw a solid line or a solid border around your text. Then we can also add border radius to the edges. This will create curves around the edges of our border. So I want us to have a border radius of 10 pixels around our text. A border radius of 10 pixels in the border. So this is how it will look like. Okay, then also let's talk about margin, a property called margin. Margin is simply a space between two elements. So back to our HTML, we have this first section which has the first P, then the second section which has the second P, and the third P follows, followed by our follow us or follow me list and the last P. So we want to create margins. You can use margins to create spaces in between the various elements. So let's call P1 the class P1 and give it a margin bottom, because we want to create a margin at the bottom. So margin bottom, say 50 pixel. So all that we mean is create a space of 50 pixel between the first P and the second P. Then we can also create a similar space or similar margin for the second P as well. This will also create 50 pixel margin between the second P and the third P. So P3 too can have a margin of 50 pixel below it. Okay, so let me quickly create .p3 will also have a margin of 50 pixel below it. Margin bottom of 50 pixel. Okay, right, very simple. Okay, so now let's talk about, and margins, we have a shorthand way of writing margin, and with the shorthand way, you just type margin, then maybe 20 pixel to the top, 10 pixel to the bottom, 5 pixel to the left, and say 10 pixel to the right. So this is a shorthand way of writing margins, other than calling individual sides of the element like margin left, top, bottom, or right. All right, so quickly let's talk about another property called padding. Padding is simply a space around or within an element. So let's use our P2 class for this demo. Okay, so our P2 is wrapped in a border, and we want to create a margin between the text and the border lines. So to do that, we can use a shorthand, padding let's say 20 pixel to the top, 20 pixel to the right, 20 pixel to the left, no, sorry, 20 pixel to the bottom, 20 pixel to the right, and 20 pixel to the left. So when I save and refresh, this is what we will get. Or we could have simply typed padding 20 pixel. CSS will apply, we will get the same effect. CSS will apply padding of 20 pixel to all sides of the text. Or we could have called individual sides padding top, padding bottom, padding left, or padding right to give different values. Okay, so let's stick to just this one, and when you refresh, you see that you get a nice padding around your text. Okay, there is this property also, height and width. Height is the normal height that we know, and width is the normal width that we know. So in this width stuff, we will apply width to the footer part of our page, and this is the footer part. The footer part has the copyright text. So all that we need to do is call the footer element, give it a height of say 50 pixel, then a width of 100 pixel. 100 pixel means fill all from the left to right, fill the space with 100 pixel width. Okay, then before we can see its effect, we need to give it a background color of say teal, right? So now when I refresh, you get a nice footer background color. Then we can also apply padding top so that the text will be 20 pixels. We'll have a padding of 20 pixels from the top, then we will align it at the center, text align center. Alright, so this will let us have a very nice effect, yeah, like this, very beautiful. Then we can even give it a margin top of 50 pixel as well, so that it will be separated from the immediate text by 50 pixel. Alright, so this is its effect, very beautiful. Okay, so that's how we can use height and width in CSS. Okay, our next item is pseudo classes. Pseudo classes can be used to style a hover effect, a visited effect, or an active effect. So we will use our quotes, which is the P2 class, for this demo. Alright, so all that we want to achieve is when we hover the mouse on our P2 element, change the background to teal, background color to teal, and change the text, the color of the text to white. Okay, so let me refresh the page, hover over it, very simple. So you see that when I hover the mouse over it, the background changes to teal and the text changes to white. So pseudo classes are very important. Visited is also a pseudo class. So when we visit a link, we want the color to change to, let's say, violet. Alright, so let me refresh the page and see its effect. Yes, so you see that the links have changed to violet when it is visited. Okay, very simple. So pseudo class comes in handy when you want to style events, and there are a lot of them. We have active, link, visited, and all that. Okay, now let's quickly talk about effects. Yeah, there are effects that you can apply to your web page to make it look very beautiful. And the first on the bill is the box shadow effect. So we have our image. We want to apply a box shadow effect to our image, our profile image. And to do that, let's go and give the image an ID. So let me call it ID equal to, let's say, profile picture, profile pic. Alright, profile dash pic. And we've not talked about or implemented IDs. So to call the image ID to style, all that we need to do is type your hash sign followed by profile dash image or pic. Yeah, we gave the ID as profile pic. Let me double check. Okay, profile pic, right. Then you just bring your brackets. Okay, so box shadow, you want the box shadow to be 10 pixels around it, then the color to be teal. So let's check the effect. Okay, so you see that a box shadow will appear around our image, but we want it to be blurred out, so we have to add another value to it, which is 5 pixels. So we want to blur it by 5 pixels. Okay, so this is the effect now, and the 10 pixel is too much. Let's make it 2 pixel by 1 pixel. Alright, so this will be the effect. So you can manipulate the figures to suit you. Let's create margins around it. So we want a margin top of, say, 50 pixel, then a margin bottom of, say, 50 pixel. Alright, so when we refresh, we will create a margin of 50 pixels at the top and 50 pixels at the bottom. Very simple. So this is the effect of box shadow, or this is how to implement box shadow. Then we can also implement another effect called text shadow. So by default, this applies text shadow to our text. Let's use the P1 for this scenario. So text shadow of, say, 5 pixel. No, 5 pixel is too much. 2 pixels, 2 pixels. Then we want to give it a blur. No, we want to give it a color of teal. Let's check the effect first. So this is how it will look like, but we need to blur it out. So to blur it out, we have to add another value, say 5 pixel. So when I refresh, this is how we are going to get the text shadow effect. Very simple. Then the last effect that we will talk about is gradient. There are other more effects, but for the purpose of this introductory class, we will limit ourselves to these. Okay, so to implement a gradient effect, we will use our footer element for that. So we can either call the footer element again, or go to where the previous one and implement these properties. So background image. So to implement a gradient, you need to call the background image property, followed by a linear. We are implementing a linear gradient. Then inside the brackets, you call the colors. So we want to use teal and yellow as our gradient. So let's refresh and see its effect. Very beautiful. Then you can also give a direction to your gradient. So in our case, we want to right. We want to give a direction. So when I refresh, this is the effect that we will get. But you see that our text is so close to the borders of the browser. Yes, this is because I use this code. This is a reset code. By default, let me cut this out and save, and let's see its effect. So by default, you see that the browser will try to give spaces around our content, but we want the footer to cover all these space, and to do that we need to reset the browser first. So in order to do so, all that we need to do is to implement this code, and this will remove all spaces around the borders of the browser, and we can style it by ourselves. And we will do that by going to our HTML. I wrapped the HTML content in a container, a class called container, or in a div. Divs are just containers that wraps our content. But look at something here. I didn't include the footer in the div container, or in the container that I wrapped around the other text. Okay, so all that I need to do is come to my style, call the class container, and give it a margin of, say, 20 pixels. This will create 20 pixels margin around the browser. So you see that there is a 20 pixel margin that has been created around the browser. So basically, this is how our page is looking now. We can implement more styling to make it look more beautiful, but this is what we have now. Okay, so see you in the next class. Thanks for watching, and please do well to subscribe to this channel. Bye.